Chair would like to now call on Mr. Boyer to offer an amendment. Do you have just one amendment, or other?
I have one en bloc amendment, which will be the last amendment on the Republican side, given that you have no more amendments?
Well, we do have some amendments on the Democratic side, but
how many amendments do you have on your side? Because we got like 400 more if you want us to go.
You've been very generous in taking up our time in this markup, but I don't want to be criticized for not calling on a Republican to offer an amendment at this point. If you prefer, we can have some more Democrats.
How many amendments does your side have? Because what we're trying to do is trying to be helpful here, Mr. Chairman. We're taking 8 amendments and making them en bloc to be cooperative here.
Maybe a couple of people there's 2 that will be offered and voted on.
Okay. I mean, we have 2 amendments on our side that will be offered and voted on, and there may be there'll be several. I don't know how many will be offered and withdrawn. Does that make you want to go now with yours, or do you want to wait?
No, I think we'll take. Show your hand. Have you brought up Title IV to the bill?
Oh, the bill's been open for amendment at any point for a very long time.
All right. Well, I will reserve the right to offer this amendment and allow you to go next.
All right. Mr. Space. Oh, just a minute. I did promise Mr. Matheson.
Oh.
You don't care? Then Mr. Space. Mr. Space, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a relatively simple but important amendment, particularly for agricultural producers who are affected by the bill. The bill itself provides offset credits for certain agricultural activities. Section 732 is the section that provides for those credits. Section 733 defines those credits somewhat vaguely. We did attempt to resolve that by way of an amendment earlier today, but at the chair's suggestion that we would work on those issues, that amendment was withdrawn. Notwithstanding that offset activity credit remains in the bill, Section 734 currently imposes a requirement that with limited exceptions, these activities which are subject to offset credits are eligible for those credits only if they started after January 1st, 2009. The theory being that we want to reward people who begin these new activities in capturing carbon. The problem is that by limiting these offsets only to those projects began after January 1st, 2009, we're prejudicing those who have engaged in those activities in advance, who are essentially at the head of the curve when it comes to climate change conduct. One example that comes to mind is no-till plowing or no-till practices in the agricultural community. If you have 2 farmers, one who has been engaging in responsible practices for the last 5 years, no-till plowing, for example, on one side of the road, and on the other side of the street, a farmer that has never engaged in it but begins to engage in the activity after January 1st, 2009, the more irresponsible farmer will get the offset credit. The responsible farmer will not. And although this may sound a bit mundane to most of the members of this committee, it's actually very important to those farmers who want to participate in this bill. So it's not only unfair to those farmers who have been proactive, it's also encouraging farmers that have been engaging in the no-till practices. It will encourage them to cease that activity for a defined period of time and then reinitiate, and that circumvents the very intent and purposes of the bill. So what this amendment essentially provides, and it is the material part of the amendment is in subsection B2, that will provide that the activity that the individual seeks an offset for must have begun after January 1st of 2009, except with regard to activities that are easily and readily reversible, and where the administrator determines that to change the date would remove the incentive to cease and then reinitiate. It's a rather complicated and complex analogy, but it's one that applies especially to those relatively far or small family farms. This should be a somewhat non-controversial amendment, and we're asking that the body of this committee approve this amendment.
Gentlemen, yield to me. I think this amendment is a good one, and I urge members to support it. You are allowing the offsets for projects that have been done in anticipation of the controls. Is that?
If
Yes.
The Chairman would yield back the time. Not necessarily in anticipation of the legislation, but there are farmers right now in Ohio's 18th District, for example, that are and have been for several years engaging in no-till practices on their farms. And they've been doing it because it was the responsible thing to do, it was the right thing to do, and not necessarily for any kind of monetary gain. What this bill will do, as it's written now, is reward those farmers who commence engagement in no-till practices, but it won't reward those farmers who have been doing it for several years. So this amendment is designed to give the administrator of the EPA the authority to look back and capture those people that have been doing it, to give them the full credit of the carbon capture offset.
I think it makes a great deal of sense.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen's time, you back the balance of your time?
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barton?
Mr. Chairman, I know the hour's late and we want to catch planes or go eat supper, or depending on your mood, go have a drink because you're so despondent about this passing or whatever. But my good friend from Ohio has just highlighted one of the real problems in this legislation. We're going to give credit, if this becomes a part of the bill, and since you said you support it, it's going to, for activities that have already occurred that may or may not have been intended to get credits simply because somebody made a decision sometime after January the 1st, 2001 to do something that they thought made sense, but now will qualify for offsets that can become a commodity that can be sold. My great-grandfather had 3 windmills on his farm in Whitney, Texas in 1890. If you use this logic and change that date from January the 1st, 2001 to January the 1st, 1890, he would be eligible if he were alive.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
That is a legitimate, entirely legitimate concern that you have, and I believe that this amendment addresses that concern because it confines the ability to take advantage of this exception to those cases where it's not just simply easily reversible, but in those cases where the administrator finds that there is an incentive for people who are engaged in smart, responsible practices to stop doing so and then re-engage or reinitiate after a period of time so that they can then become eligible. In your case, in your grandfather's case, he's not likely to tear those windmills down and then rebuild them after a period of time to take advantage of the credit. In this case, with the no-till practices, all a farmer would have to do is stop behaving responsibly, after a period of time, re-engage in the practice, and then he's eligible for the credits. And in that interim gap, we're going to be seeing an additional influx of carbon into the atmosphere, and I think it obviates and is counterproductive to the purpose of the bill.
Well, reclaiming my time, is, if you're going to have a cap-and-trade program, which I don't think we need, but that's beside the point, it makes sense to have an offset component. But we've already, I think we've shown in the debate, and I think we've got instances that when you have offsets, they are extremely subject to abuse and to fraud. And for the life of me, with all due respect, I don't see why we're accepting something that is retroactive. At least make your offset program proactive so that it doesn't kick in until the act actually kicks in. And I mean, I think you're going to be amazed at how many projects all of a sudden seem to qualify because they were commenced in the early 2000s, and then you're going to get pressure to come in and say, well, you know, we did that same thing in 1995, so maybe we ought to retroactively go the date even a little bit farther back. I mean, you're setting a terrible precedent, Mr. Chairman, by, and I'm not discounting the sincerity of the author of the amendment, but this is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be abused. There are going to be millions or hundreds of millions of dollars fraudulently claimed under this program, and I just would hope we wouldn't accept it. But I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The vote now comes on the space amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it, and the amendment's agreed to.